Ever wondered what it's like to be an artist? What makes them tick? How do they know where to start? How do they become artists in the first place? Where do they get their ideas from? And more importantly, what do they eat for breakfast? Here at Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, we are lucky enough to look after the Swindon collection of modern British art. Over 600 artworks from the last 150 years, from paintings to sculptures, by some of the biggest names in British art. This is what happened when we went to meet them. Come with us and meet the artist.
Hey everybody, welcome to Meet the Artist. This is the talk series where we chat to artists who are represented in our collection here at Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, and try and find out a little bit more about their practice and what it is that makes them tick. And I'm joined today by John Greenwood, who has a fabulous piece in our collection, Rings and Strings and Things, which we'll chat about in a moment. Hi John, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi Katie.
Hi. I thought that maybe we could start out from the beginning, I suppose. What made you want to become an artist? Have you always wanted to be an artist? How did it all begin?
I think when I was a kid, I think I wanted to be an airline pilot, but that's probably because my parents told me to want that. I've always drawn. I've always been kind of quite good, through school as an artist. And the longer that, I think part of what makes me become an artist is that as I was funneled through the school system and you take exams and you specialize, you choose the subjects you enjoy and are good at. And so you end up, by the time you get through to A levels, that you're in the art class, and it beats the hell out of everything else that I was doing. So, something that I did enjoy, did in my spare time, but I wouldn't say I was especially committed to it. And I wouldn't say, so I went off to foundation course, chose while I was there to be a painter rather than any other subject, but I didn't go in necessarily thinking I was going to be a painter. And then went off, eventually chose that because, again, I was enjoying it. My friends were in that kind of area of the foundation course. And, did a BA, wasn't committed by the end of it. I think I was so put off by so much of the teaching that I think I came away thinking, enjoyed that, but I'm not going to do it because I'm not very good at it. And I stopped. And then in the year when I was kind of earning a living after my BA, I became massively committed to it. And it was peculiar. It was actually after art college, it became an obsession. And I was just drawing all my spare time, whenever I could. If I went out for a walk, I was picking things up, bringing them home and just drawing them. And so it crept up on me. So the answer is no, I haven't always wanted to be an artist. I was probably about 21 when I committed. So, and I've more or less held to that since, and still doing it, really. It was actually reading one particular book called the Northern Romantic Tradition, but I can't remember the guy's name now. It was about romanticism and the Northern Romantic tradition, and it treated art. Was it Rosenblum who had written it? And it treated art as something that, even like lots of the art that had been taught to me as a kind of formalistic game when I was at art college in the 70s and early 80s, is like, you're balancing colours, you're making things that are flat. It seemed like a pointless game that had nothing to do with the world. And this was talking about the same paintings, things like Rothko, but as opposed to just being, look at that red next to that blue, it was the sense that he was describing kind of mental and, for want of a better phrase, existential states in painting. There's this revelation that you realize that painting, even abstract painting, all painting, carried meaning in a way that was underplayed when I was at college, and it enthused me. I kind of realized that the way that you relate to the world and that you think about the world can be, art can be a vehicle for expressing that. And it reinvigorated me, whereas I'd been slowly, I think maybe on foundation course I was enthusiastic and the teaching there was better, and it was about creativity and finding yourself. And then the BA seemed to be, you've got to play the game by these rules, you know, you've got to, you know, love Matisse, and you've got to want to do what he did, and so on. And it didn't necessarily grab me. It wasn't my kind of way of thinking. And this single book just, you know, did get me. The painting is actually kind of not as important to me as the drawing. The painting justifies the making of the drawings in a way. Otherwise, I just have endless drawings. You wouldn't resolve them. They would, you know, I don't know. So I have sketchbooks in the studio. I need to hold that up so you can't see me. And then on the sketchbooks, well, that's a bit of a strange one. I kind of fill them in. You can see this. So that's a page of the sketchbook next to it, and you know, it goes on. This is a present one, so it's at the end of, eventually you get to blank pages, but that's how sketchbooks work. And that's what I do. And I often, my process is, you know, my studio's at the end of the garden. I go in there. Most mornings I don't start straight away. You know, I can be wandering around for a couple of hours before the brain starts to move. I'm kind of grumpy and sluggish. And I always start the day with a cup of coffee. And so I sit at my desk, often in the mornings, with a cup of coffee, and I look through the sketchbook, or there's something that I've seen, or, you know, often I work from photographs. I rarely work from life these days. And I draw. So I just draw, and I look for things in, you know, source material that I find interesting, shapes, you know, expressions, and I just draw. And then I often go back through the sketchbook. So sometimes I start and I've not got a source material, and I just flick through the pages and I go, well, if I had a twiddle there, or I put a hole through that, and that just kind of, time disappears.
Yeah,
you know, it's endless doodling, and at times I think I could probably be close to certified when I do it. You know, my wife used to despair that you never make anything, you just doodle, just endless doodling. So and then the paintings come from a distillation of that process. So I always doodle with the idea that this could be, you know, end up as some kind of part source material. But then I kind of collect them together, and you get a sense, oh, I could make a painting that looks like this. And I put slithers of paper. I go through old sketchbooks, and I just say, oh, use that bit, and I can mix it with that. And I put them, and then I spend, you know, a few days, and it just pulls these together until I've got, you know, one of these little thumbnail sketches. Or just, you know, any one of those. These are actually from bits of paper I have in the house. You know, notebooks that I can't be bothered to go out and get my sketchbooks. I can doodle, and I've glued them in there. And one of those will be the basis for a painting. I'll just think, oh, I like that one, you know. And that's it. So I then draw them out and fill them in with colour. And the creative part and the exciting part is often the drawing. You know, the work in the sketchbook. When I actually start to do the paintings, the initial drawing seems to be kind of full of quite a degree of angst of like getting it wrong, whereas in the sketchbook nobody looks, nobody cares, and I just can make these things. Doesn't matter, I can put in the most ludicrous things in them, and it doesn't matter, you know, nobody's judging me. And then you realize when they become paintings, there's the potential of being public. People go, oh, I'm not sure you should do that. You know, you've been doing this work thinking you're mining something of interest, and you know, they come out and they become more, you know, you put them, so a lot of the time when I make that leap from these little thumbnails to filling in a canvas, and I spend a couple of days drawing the canvas and just go, no, there's nothing there, you know, it's not working. And while you're battling to find out whether it does, you know, what you believe to be of interest actually is kind of illusionary, you can't get it out, it's not, you know, it's not what you intended, can be quite a, you know, I mean, not in the real world, not like, you know, having lots of difficult jobs, but artistically, you're balancing something and it feels awkward because it's not working, and you can sense this thing ebbing away from you, and that's an unpleasant feeling, you know, in artistic terms. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when it works, it must be amazing.
Oh, agreed. It, you know, that's the bit that you're doing it for. You know, you literally just, you feel all cocky, you know, for a day or two after. It's like, hey, look what I can do. But that is, you know, a long way from common, you know. While I was kind of in my postgraduate year, 21, 22, I decided, you know, to commit to being an artist. It's all I wanted to do at that point, and probably forever. But to get back into an MA, and I ended up basically working to get the money, you know, and it took me, I think, 6-7 years before I got into the Royal College, having taken time out, you know, built up a stronger portfolio, different body of work completely, but also just the you know, living in London and paying for a studio and that kind of stuff. It took a lot of work. So for every year that went by, for every 2 years that went by, one was kind of working and the other would be just earning the money to have the time, really. So, and then when I went to the Royal College, when I came out with my degree show, Charles Saatchi, who was one of the, you know, he was a massive collector at the time, he bought a couple of pieces from my degree show and asked me if I'd do some more for him. And it was absolute shock out of the blue. I had no idea that, I'd never heard this happening. I realise that now he was shifting the way of collecting and starting to buy student work, or he'd probably been buying it throughout, but you didn't hear of it. You heard about the blockbusters, the big artists, the American minimalists that he was showing. And the fact that he came along and said, right, I like what you're doing. Nobody knew that I was nobody that I was a student with was aware that this was like some prize that was handed out each year. It just landed on my doorstep. So Rings and Strings and Things was, I ended up painting, I think, 7 paintings for him, plus he already owned 2. And then he showed me there was a big show in his gallery in North London called the Young British Artist at the time, which was it was a big thing. It bust new ground. It had people like Damien Hirst in it and Rachel Whiteread. And this idiot in the corner that was me, you know, doing very, very kind of different stuff. And at the end of the time, so he had 9 paintings, and I think he turns his collection over. So sometimes he builds artists up and would have sold them, and, you know, or had them in warehouses. And I think with some of my work, I don't know what happened to it, but, you know, it ended up in Swindon. I didn't know it was in Swindon. There's other pieces of mine got, you know, I think in Birmingham Museum and Paisley Museum. And there's other of his paintings from that time which I think are in hospitals. So he gave them away. They weren't worth very much, I think. So that's, I guess, how and it's an act of generosity. That's a bit unkind. He spread them around, and so one got handed to Swindon. So it's not an early piece from my career. It was a point when I was, you know, half formed, if not necessarily formed. So I'm still half formed.
It is such an interesting piece. I mean, it's one that, you know, I think I and so many people just go back to time and time again, because the imagery is so, if you don't mind me saying, unusual and quite surreal. It's, you know, kind of these dripping, pulsating, leaking, bursting forms. It's quite incredible. I mean, where are you able to say where that imagery came from? Is it, you know, was it kind of all from your imagination, or did you, like, what was the starting point for it?
So I don't strictly remember what I was doing. I remember that I was in a bit of turmoil at the time. I was, you know, there's an element to which my relationships was not in a good state, you know, and I felt quite messed up. And I think it may be there's part of, you know, horrible thing, because I didn't deny that it was, you know, a self-portrait or the work of that time. Somebody asked me when reviewing the YBH show, you know, are these self-portraits? And I went, no, except, you know, everything that you do must in some level, you know, say something about you. But I look back now and I don't think it's a self-portrait. That's not what I looked like then. But there was a sense, I think, that I was trying to channel the sense of desperation and confusion and excitement of kind of being in relationships, wanting to be in relationships, having failed relationships in a certain sense. I think the whole of that Saatchi work, when I look back now, I can kind of see it's autobiographically. And I don't think that's necessary. You know, you don't need to know that But I think that sense of broken figures, of figures trying to combine. It doesn't sound very complicated, does it? It's quite obvious, but you know, this thing that it's a single creature made up of other creatures. It's wanting to be things, it's becoming things, and then that kind of falls apart in the act of chasing. So that does sound a little bit obvious in a way, but I can't imagine being anything else now. I mean, it's so woven into everything I do. It's and what I really like about it is it becomes the center of what otherwise I don't know what the purpose of my existence would be. Not that, you know, it doesn't need to go anywhere, art, but the sense that kind of, you know, if I go for a walk, anything I see, anything I talk about with somebody is potential. I can take it into my world and link it up, and it means that I'm this kind of node at the middle of my existence that produces things about me. And so it kind of seems to, it's very, very self-centered, but it kind of knits me together. That's, you know, and I don't know whether, I think that must be true of most artists really. It's that sense that you've got something that gives you identity, that makes everything you think, everything you see, you know, it can be a kind of centralizing point of it. So the fragmented person that I paint, it pulls that together, that sense that we live in this kind of quite disparate world where we're going out with many different identities into different situations, and you know, who the hell are you? Well, I answer that for me, and it doesn't always work this way, and it's never kind of that simple. It's always got frayed edges, but it feeds into this, you know, the center of my being is this: I'm an artist, really. Everything I do can be used, is used, and yeah, I can't imagine living without that. Well, early on in lockdown, that I was offered a show in America, in Los Angeles, which will be, hopefully if it works, will be the biggest show I've done for a couple of decades, really. So there's something very exciting, very focused there. So for me, I go against the grain. Lockdown has worked really well. It's allowed me to just get in the studio without distractions and work hard, and to bring the kind of the burbling disparity of my sketchbooks and think, right, now look at it, you've got a show in a year's time, build it. And you have to kind of, this sense that you're chasing something in the you know, in the sketches, and it has to work, and I have to turn it out. And you get these periods of focus. I always work well to a show, and it's given, you know, this time I've used really well. So it's not that I'm enjoying lockdown, but it works for me. So in terms of what I'm doing, I have one here that I produced earlier. So my present painting, which isn't quite finished, is this. Oh, it's fit up to you, so you know, so I can't really show a huge amount. Quite small paintings, and I've done about 15 of these. Not necessarily look like that, but various kind of works ready for the show. I've still got another 3 or 4 months to go. So I'm working really well, and I'm really enjoying it. And the work is, I think, better than I've ever done. And there's something, you know, really exciting about that. I think maybe as you know, progress through your life, I've become a little bit easier to please than I used to be. I'm not going to go in all directions. I know what I'm doing. I knew this was coming, so I was thinking about this. And this is salesmanship. This is a friend of mine called Rosalind Davis, who's written a book called What They Didn't Teach You in Art School. And essentially it answers the question of how you survive. One of the hardest things about being an artist is how do you marry that with living in this culture, which is unlikely to support you properly. And it encourages you to work on your system of friends that buoy you up, and to work on the ways of strategies of surviving. Often, you know, you have to get through the art college system, or, you know, that's not a bad thing, but you come out and then you know, you need to work out a way of creating a living, and it does, you know, look at that. So it's What They Didn't Teach You in Art School by Rosalind Davis and Annabelle Tilley. And I think if I was a student now, I would like somebody to hand me that with my degree.